Okay, well, hello everybody. Welcome. I hope that your fall semester is going well and glad to have you here at today's workshop, Level Up Your Management, Supporting First Gen Professionals. I'm Lisa Reichert. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Career and Professional Development Lead within the People and Organization Development Team at Berkeley People and Culture. And I'm delighted to serve as the host for today's Now Encore Series workshop, which centers on the importance of recognizing and supporting our first-gen professionals. As trailblazers who are often the first in their families to navigate higher education and professional careers, first-gen colleagues bring fresh perspectives and strengths that enrich our workplaces. And today, our workshop will explore the research, identities, and practical strategies to support and empower our growing and talented community of first-gen professionals. And here to guide us today are our awesome presenters, Casey Wong and Dr. Jose Rivas. Casey brings 10 plus years of experience in K-12 nonprofit and higher education as the Associate Director at UC Berkeley Public Service Center. She supports community engaged professionals, leads student leadership training, and collaborates on campus community partnerships. Before joining the Public Service Center, Casey worked in schools and nonprofits, increasing higher education access for underrepresented, low-income, and first-gen students. She is a founding board member of First Gen Connect, a professional collective promoting first-generation professional leadership. Casey holds a BA in psychology and education minor from UC Berkeley and a Master of Education in Prevention, Science, and Practice from Harvard Graduate School of Education. Dr. Jose Rivas received a BA in Ethnic Studies from UC Berkeley and an MPA from CSU Hayward and an education doctorate in organizational change and leadership from USC, where he researched the career, transition, and success of first-generation professionals. At UC Berkeley, he served as the executive director of college preparation, overseeing college preparation programs. After UC Berkeley, he served as the executive director of First Graduate, a nonprofit in San Francisco. He founded Rivas Works to consult small business, nonprofit, and higher education organizations. And he founded First Gen Connect as a nonprofit to support first gen professionals, advise organizations that employ them, and continue his research. Welcome, Casey and Jose. We're so excited to learn from your insights and experience. And the room is all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lisa, for the kind introduction. I am Casey, she, her pronouns, and as Lisa mentioned, currently the Associate Director at the Public Service Center. But I've had the privilege of knowing Dr. Rivas, who's my co-presenter today, for over 15 years. He was my first supervisor, and as someone that's first gen college grad and professional, he's been a mentor of mine. And Jose, would you like to intro briefly before I go to the next slide?
Sure, yeah. Hello, everybody. Again, call me Jose. As Casey said, Casey was one of my college advisors in a program that we started at Cal long, long time ago. So she was a leader back then, and so it's been great to be able to continue working with her as we start and launch this effort, really to focus on what happens with those first gen kids when they go into college, graduate, what happens. So what happens after that? And so that's what we're focused on.
Great. So just a quick introduction to the nonprofit organization that Jose and I are a part of. We founded First Gen Connect along with a few other board members who may be here today, may not be, but we're calling them in as well. And our vision, as you see here on the screen, is a future that promotes, embraces, and inspires the bold leadership and decision-making of first-gen professionals. Our mission is to empower an intergenerational network of first-gen professionals to advocate for equitable opportunities through dynamic collaborations and partnerships. And one thing that I love and I often talk about in our board meetings is I love the intergenerational aspect of our organization. So we cover the range, welcoming new emerging professionals that are first generation, as well as professionals that have been around as first gen professionals. So I'm going to move on to the agenda just to give folks a roadmap, a sense of how we will spend our time today for the next hour or so. We're going to talk a little bit about first-gen professionals, why support them, how do we even define first-gen professionals, and then I'm going to pass it over to Jose, Dr. Rivas, to share a little bit about the first-gen professional landscape, as well as his conceptual framework for supporting first-gen professionals. Then we'll transition into a bit of breakout room and invite you to be in conversation with your colleagues, exploring the intersectional identities of first-gen professionals. And after that, we'll come back and share some strategies on supporting first-gen professionals. And hopefully we'll have some time for question and answer from you all. And we'll definitely share resources, and all of the slide deck will be available afterwards, so you can have links to the resources too. So that's a sense of where we're going today with our agenda. But before I jump in, I would love if Lisa could help us share the Zoom poll results. Would love to see kind of where folks are coming from. Awesome. So I am seeing a majority of us identify as first-gen professionals, over 70%. So hello to my first-gen professionals. I see you. Thanks for showing up today. And the second question is, do you supervise staff who identify as first-gen professionals? And again, a good majority, almost 60%, sharing that they do support first-gen professional staff, which is so exciting to see. So thank you, Lisa, for creating the Zoom poll. We can exit that for now. Right. So I'm going to jump in to this slide where I'm going to just set the stage a little bit, give us some context as to why support first-gen professional. So in the literature, there's a growing body of research on first-gen college students. I think that's been the case over the past few years. First-gen professionals, however, is still kind of a growing body of research. And so there isn't quite a standard or accepted definition, as this is an emerging field in academia. What you see here on the screen is our organization's definition of first-gen professional. So we define first-gen professionals, or FGPs, as individuals in a professional career who are their first in their family to graduate from college or enter a professional career. There are other organizations that will have slightly different definitions of a first-gen professional. So for instance, the Office of Civil Rights at the US Department of Commerce uses this definition, which I'll read out loud for my notes here. Those who are one of the first in their immediate families to enter professional workforce. So slightly different definition, but essentially it's a person who's first in their family to enter a professional career. And now, why support first-gen professionals? So as Jose mentioned at the beginning, there's a lot of support for first-gen college students. But as first gen students graduate and enter the workforce, they still remain being first in their journeys. And so for us, we find that it's important to have a space to support first gen professionals. And some fun fact as it relates to the UC system, nearly or over one-third of UC undergraduates identify as first-gen college students. And many of them graduate and will launch into a career. And what happens to them, when they are off into their first careers and their many careers after? So we find that it's important if the UC system is committed and prides itself in educating a diverse population of California, that we as supervisors, employers, hiring managers, we should also commit to supporting our diverse workforce. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Jose to give us a little bit of background on the research and the conceptual framework on first-gen professionals.
Thank you. Okay, so what we're going to talk about a little bit today is we're presenting what we're looking at as our theory of change for first generation professionals. So, what a theory of change is basically, it's an outline, it's a map of what can be done that can lead to certain outcomes that you're searching for. In our case, we're looking at what can be done or how can something be established for first generation professionals to help them get to wherever it is that they need to get to. So whether it's leadership development, skills building, moving up within the company, it's figuring out that outcome and then putting in some kind of a framework that can help organizations, supervisors, mentors, and leaders to really help their first generation professional staff get to that outcome. Okay, so we go to the next slide. So this is what it looks like. So folks that like uh, the charts and the kind of the outlines, this is what it is. And so what we're looking at is looking at three different pieces. So the identity, and this is all backed by actual accepted theory, looking at the identity of the first gen professional, which is what we're going to talk about today. And that's really starting to identify of who is your first generation professional. What do they look like? What are the demographics? And we'll go a little bit further into that. The second part of it is actually considering that the environment that they're in, both the office that they're sitting in, the institution, but then the society as a whole, and looking at what's going on at that particular point in time. And then the third piece is looking at the capital. And so when you're looking at the capital, a lot of the approach that we're looking at in is not this deficit model, is really looking at an asset approach when you're working with the first generation professional. Again, that's a different part of the conversation that we don't unfortunately have time to cover today. But that leads into this notion of self-efficacy. And so we'll talk a little bit about self-efficacy. So what we're saying is that you consider these three frameworks when you're putting in your strategies, but through a self-efficacy lens, so that when you're putting together your actions, your strategies, whatever tools and implementations you're going to do within your own shop, that you use this particular framework. And as always, I always say that you should begin with the outcomes first. So identify what it is that you're trying to get to, so that you have that guiding star of where it is that you want to go. Next. So the identity. So one of the things is to really look at is, and this is from a research background, is what is coming up that we see with first generation professionals. So as Casey mentioned, unfortunately, there just isn't a whole lot of research that's done on the first generation population. So once they graduate from college or enter their professional career, there isn't a whole lot of research that's done on that. It is starting to grow. And basically, one of the main things that's coming out is that this population is really has multiple identities. So it's not just one or not another. And so a lot of times when there's a lot of conversations about first generation professionals, they're keying in on one or two pieces of the identity. And so what you generally tend to see is that it goes to the income. So a lot of times, if they're low income, the assumption is that they're a first generation professional. Or a lot of times they're looking at the ethnic or racial background of the individual and assuming that a particular ethnicity or race means that they're first generation professional. It's not the case, and so a first generation professional can have multiple different identities. The other part that we're really starting to look at is looking at the intersectionality of their identity so that when you look at your first generation professional staff, they're not just one, they're not just another. It's a combination of all of them, and you can't really assume that one thing is going to be the only one identity is going to be the only one that you need to worry about. So as long as you take care of that, then the entire person is being supported. And so when you're looking at these strategies that you're implementing, are you taking into account their full breadth of their identity? And again, this is all backed by research on the multiple first generation identities. This is one of the things that's coming out quite a bit. What you do see in a lot of the research is that a good number, a good proportion ratio of first generation professionals do come from low income backgrounds. They do come from communities of color. So there is a correlation to that. So it's not totally out of this world to think that if somebody comes from a certain background, they're automatically first gen. There may be, but again, you want to look at the intersectional identity and the understanding that just because somebody looks a certain way does not mean that they're a first generation professional. Next. So the other thing, and this is a lot of what we've really been focusing on, is really looking at self-efficacy. So self-efficacy, the difference between the motivation, and so what you see in a lot of practices that's going on, a lot of organizations will focus and key in on the motivational piece of it, so that they really focus on trying to motivate their staff to do whatever it is that they need to do. But when you look at a lot of the research, a lot of first generation professionals, one of their core capitals is that they are already very motivated. And so if you look at the journey that a first gen professional has had to make from going through high school, going through college, they graduate from college, they've gotten their first job, they've gone through that interview process, so they're already there. So there is some level of motivation there already. And what's often missing is that there isn't anything else that's addressed besides the motivation. I'm not saying motivation is not a good thing to address. A lot of what we're saying is really to focus and key in on the self-efficacy. And there is research that's longstanding that shows how self-efficacy can impact the actual choices and decisions that an individual make. So self-efficacy, what it promotes, what it says is that it is if an individual has a particular confidence in a particular area or a particular action or a particular project, they're more than likely going to take action to try to achieve that. As opposed to wanting to do it, the self-efficacy portion of it is what actually gives them the push to do it. And the research, what it says, and a lot of the practices that we see that I've done in my background is we use some of this, but not necessarily all or different pieces of it. And so the biggest piece and really the most significant is to give first generation folks actual experience in whatever it is that you're trying to get them to do. By getting firsthand experience, that's what gives them that confidence that they can do it. Even if they don't succeed, there's learning that can happen from it, and that's where the feedback piece of it can come in. So getting that feedback on that particular effort, on that particular project. So the difference being, it's supposed to saying, you can do it, you got this, you know how to do it, is to actually give them feedback on the actual action that you're trying to get them to do. The second piece of the vicarious experience, so a lot of times we talk about mentors and role models. So this is where that piece comes in. So when you look at some of the research that's saying is that if a first generation professional sees that somebody who is like them, who comes from the same backgrounds, who has had the same experiences, is succeeding, they form a stronger connection to that experience. So even though if they may not have it themselves, they can see it in other people. So that's where this vicarious experience, so looking at other and getting exposed to different communities, different areas who share that first generation piece of it. Next. And so putting this whole model into practice. And so again, there's a couple of different pieces, and we'll talk about this later on. The first one, and this is the one that we're promoting today, is to really understand your first generation professional's identity. And to really understand that as the supervisor, as the manager, as the mentor, as the leader, to understand that it's not a monolithic group. They're very diverse within the first generation professional, and that there is this first generational identity, intersectional identity that your staff are going to have. The third point of that is to really look at the capital that they bring in, so their social capital, their cultural capital, the networks, how they do things. And there's a lot of research that shows that first generation folks have a really strength in establishing networks and getting relationships. So they're huge relationship builders, and using that as part of the strength when you're doing your work with them. The self-efficacy strategies, again, that are getting the direct experience, the role models, and the feedback. The third piece on there, and this is something that I always recommend and always try to do as much as possible, is that it's not to understand that it's a one-time shot and you're done. This is a constant thing. So this is something you have to go back, you have to assess, you have to do progress checks. Is it working? Is it not working? What else can do? Is it working well? How can you continue supporting those particular efforts? Next.
Okay, thanks so much, Jose, for sharing kind of the landscape and also your framework for supporting first-gen professionals. We are going to transition to breakout rooms and have discussions. I think we'll have maybe 4 to 5 folks in each breakout room. So when you get to your breakout room, or actually, number one thing is pay attention to which breakout room number you're in, because that will be important. So keep in mind, pay attention if you're number 1, 2, 3, 4. Once you get there, please introduce yourself to your colleagues in the space. And there are 2 prompts that we would love for you to engage in. And these are all focused on one of the components, the identity component that Jose mentioned. We also recognize that it's the lunch hour. Maybe folks are not able to kind of engage in breakout room discussion, and that's okay. So if you're unable to engage in the breakout room, you're welcome to just stay in the main room with us. And we'll hang out together. Welcome to ask us questions, or we'll just wait for the breakout rooms to close, and then we'll all come back together for a group discussion. So let me stop sharing my slide real quick because I want to drop in the chat a link to this other slide deck. So let me put this in the chat. So maybe give me a thumbs up if folks are able to access that slide deck, make edits. The idea is you find your breakout room slide deck, and as a group, we'd love for you to share some of your thoughts, your responses to the questions, the discussion questions that we have. As a way for us to capture that. So can folks, oh, thank you, Chelsea. I got a thumbs up. It looks like we have access. We can edit. All right. Let me just see. I see folks are in it. Perfect. So in a second, I'm going to ask Lisa to open up the breakout rooms for us. And as a reminder, just remember which number you're in because it corresponds with the slide. And also, if you're unable to join the breakout room and engage in discussion, that's also okay. Please hang out with us in the main room, and we'll give folks about 10 minutes. So my clock shows 12:28, so we'll come back at 12:38. And Lisa, when you're ready, I think we're ready for the breakout rooms.
Okay, great. Here we go.
Thank you so much.
I'll also broadcast a 5-minute warning. And if
Perfect.
anybody's
Thank
in a
you.
room by themselves, I'll move you to another room. So if that happens, and that room is in the middle of conversation, please welcome this person and know we're just trying to make sure everybody is grouped. All right, here we go. All right, so everybody is matched with at least one person. Some rooms have two, some rooms have four.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you, Lisa.
Sure.
I appreciate the tech support. There's a lot of
Sure.
screens to like maneuver. I forget
Yeah.
Zoom presentations.
It's good to have support. And at 12:33, I will give a 5-minute warning.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Okay. And for those who were not able to join a breakout room, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourselves or you can put them in the chat. Or you can just hang out here.
So are you both on the campus right now? No.
I'm working remote today. Yeah.
I am also working remote from my home in Oakland, where I think it's supposed
Okay.
to get to about 90 degrees today. I'm just trying to keep it shady.
Yes, it's so hot. Did you feel the earthquake, Lisa, the other night? Oh my gosh. Or Jose,
Yeah,
did you feel it was quite
I
a way to
didn't
start the
notice it.
week?
yeah, 2:56 a.m. Yeah. I think that was probably, it felt maybe because it's so close to Berkeley, the epicenter, it felt like one of the strongest and longest ones that I have experienced in my 20 plus years of living here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My partner said the same, and I was like, oh, it's just a reminder. We gotta prepare ourselves for the quote unquote big one, but that felt pretty big to me.
For sure. Okay, I'm going to, excuse me one moment. I'm going to give a 5-minute warning.
Perfect. Thank you, Lisa.
And then I felt an aftershock that morning around, I think it was a little before 8 o'clock.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was
Oh,
like,
wow.
I was in the front of our house and I was doing my Wordle, my morning ritual, and I felt like the house just got shoved, like just really quickly. Did
Oh,
you?
wow.
Yeah,
No, I didn't
feel
feel
that?
that one.
Jose, where are you?
I'm in San Leandro, so not too far.
Mhm,
When I worked on the campus, well, it depended on what time of day I left either the campus or my house.
mhm,
So like 15 minutes difference made like a half hour difference in the commute. So it would
mhm.
come by 13 to go into the campus.
Yeah. Did anybody else here feel the earthquake or any aftershocks?
Where did you live before came to the Bay?
I grew up in South Florida. I was born in New York, moved as a child to South Florida, and then came out to California for a conference and just fell in love and just like fell in love with being out here in California. And then also later fell in love and then like decided to move out here.
And then you find out about the earthquakes.
Yeah.
Although I think you always wonder, it's like, because out here we don't have the same kind of things that happen like in Florida, and like you hear about the hurricanes coming across, and it's like, so I don't know. In my mind, tornadoes and hurricanes are scarier, I guess, because earthquakes, you kind of, that it's like I think you just kind of know that eventually there's going to be an earthquake that you're going to feel. Um, but
Yeah, it is. It's interesting, like the different, I guess, mindsets. Like with an earthquake, like where you know that they could happen, you don't know when. So it's just like there's no preparation. With hurricanes, there's like a lot of warning or anxiety, like where is it going to hit? How hard is it? What's the category going to be? So they're kind of, yeah, different kinds of scenarios.
I've known a couple of people that had gone back to Florida, and then they're like right the next year is like a major hurricane that swept through. Luckily, it missed where they live, but they felt some of the flooding, a lot of the winds. There's like some of the trees got blown over, but not they didn't get hit by the brunt of the hurricane that came across. And so it's like I emailed them, it's just because you don't know, right? 'Cause my mom will call me. She lives in the Sacramento area, and she hears there's an earthquake happening somewhere. Just kind of called her because she hasn't, in her mind, it's like it happened like down the street from my house.
Yikes. Yeah, it is. It can be very devastating. I did, excuse me, I did just to, I closed the room so people will be coming back in less than a minute now.
Great.
It was fun chatting.
Hey, welcome back. I see folks are trickling back into the space, and I think now everyone is forced back because the room just shut. So Thank you all for engaging in the breakout rooms. I know an hour session is not a long time, and we don't give you all a long time to kind of get into deep conversation, but hopefully it was a helpful start to a conversation and just recognizing and thinking about first gen professional identities. So I'm seeing some responses on the slide deck. So I invite folks to just kind of take a minute and scroll through and do kind of a virtual gallery walk to see, what folks were talking about, what notes came up for them in their breakout rooms. And let's see, some good comments here that I feel like I'm gonna have to spend some time to look through it thoroughly. So thank you all for sharing. We have time for maybe one or two folks if you're feeling inspired or called to, if you want to share out loud with the large group what came up in your breakout room conversations. We'd love to hear.
We can also pause recording here and then resume. So I will go ahead and do that.
So, all right. Okay. Well, thank you all again for engaging in your breakout room conversations. We're going to jump to this slide to share some strategies. I think folks always love some tangible, concrete strategies. And by all means, I'll say this is not the end all be all list. I feel like there's a lot of wisdom here with so many first gen professionals themselves. So we also welcome any other strategies that has been helpful or have been successeful. So, Jose, I might invite you to jump in here if you
Yeah.
want to chime in. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely some of these I seen uh, pieces that are I think tangents to that were happening in one of the conversations. So one of the things that I want to point out and that was brought up in the conversation was that in some instances the first gen professional was very I guess proactive in asking and getting questions, so kind of putting themselves out there. And then there were other situations where that didn't happen. And so for me, part of what was really interesting in that is that that's a lot of what I've seen in the research that I've done and what I've read is that the experiences are really, really mixed. So there isn't, again, one answer to the entire thing because there's a lot of different things that are going on with the different identities. But one of the unfortunate common experiences that I saw in the folks that I interviewed with is a lot of the experiences in college, particularly with the professors, that this individual was doing all these amazing things, but they didn't feel that there was this connection to the professor, so they were hesitant to reach out and connect with the professor beyond the class, and so again, some missed opportunities, and that's the practice that they brought with them in their professional world. And so, unfortunately, one of the things that we see a lot is that a lot of the a lot of the success depends on their luck with their supervisor. And there's a lot of instances where there's really amazing supervisors, and establishing that connection and that relationship with that first generation professional is what really is one of the key areas that a lot of the folks, and when you look at the research, that's kind of what made the key is that relationship with their direct supervisor, that relationship with the other folks who can provide that leadership. Again, looking at their network, looking at their social capital, and trying to figure out where those connections can happen. And so that's one of the things I think when we're looking at what works is to really look at look at those experiences that you've had professionally, particularly if you were a first generation professional, and identifying which of your supervisors did you connect with, which ones did you lean on, which ones became your mentors, and really try to identify what are the pieces that made the difference for you, because that may be a potential answer for you with your particular staff. One of the things that comes up in the research a lot, and it's the thing within the professional world that we don't really ever talk about, is this hidden curriculum. Hidden curriculum basically means that um, it's something that everybody knows, so nobody talks about. But if somebody is new to an environment, they may have never heard it. And so that's where a lot of the professional relationships get caught up with, particularly with folks that are fairly new into the professional world. So like people talk about networking, and when you talk to a lot of first generation college students and early career first generation professionals, this notion of networking is something that's very scary, very strange. But when you look at the research, they already have a strength in forming relationships. So how can you use that within your own strategy? So can you, as a supervisor, can you, for example, facilitate their connection to somebody else who you know? So that way you're sharing your particular capital, your networks, and you're promoting that with your first generation professional staff. Um, the asking of questions, and I learned this the hard way with one of my staff a long time ago, because my when I was the executive director, I was leader. My byline was "My door is always open," and so and in my mind, my door was open. But when I had a real conversation with one of my first generation staff, um, they did not feel that that door was open. So even though they heard it, they didn't feel it because I was their boss. I was the executive director. So there was a disconnect between them being comfortable. So what I ended up doing was actually changing my approach, and I started having bi-monthly and weekly coffee. So I just take them to coffee down the street, and we just chatted for a half hour. And so I think that's what started to get that relationship going. Because in my mind, when I say my door is always open, you can come talk to me. That's me who has the power, who has the authority, but it's not felt by my first generation professional staff or my newer staff. And so I think, again, looking at how we implement these strategies. So even though they say, um, there's a training that you can go to, is taking that step and actually, again, making it a more of an actual real option for them. The providing mentorship and strategic professional development. So this is a lot of times I find in the consulting work that I do, this is sometimes really difficult for a lot of organizations or a lot of supervisors who don't necessarily have access to the budget. And so I do want to acknowledge that this can be a difficult thing for organizations, particularly when there's budget instances that are going on. Well, I think what one of the go arounds that I've seen other organizations do is that they're providing them with the opportunities, and they're building it within their actual work. Part of their work responsibilities is they're adding this professional development as a part of it. And so it's figuring out what it is that the organization have access to. Who is your network that you can have access to? Can so, for example, and this is what one organization did. They brought in friends of friends, and they did in-house trainings around particular topics that their particular supervisor didn't have the expertise in. So this was a way for them to kind of go around sending them to these conferences that could be cost prohibitive, or looking at the travel. I know a lot of people are now doing the online stuff, which I think can work, but again, not everybody connects well online. Then the final piece that I'll talk about here, and then I encourage folks to kind of really share what's been working for them. There is growing efforts in ERG, so employee resource groups. And so there are some online that are starting, and we put access in some of the research that I've been to, so we're going to be passing out. And so there are some fields that are starting ERG. So there's a couple that I've been aware of that's focused really more so around career specific. So there's a couple of law groups that have actually started a first generation professional ERG. So in addition to the ones that focus around gender, focus around race, ethnicity, they've started a group around first generation professionals. And kind of the great thing is I tend to see this more in the academic realm versus the for-profit world, but it is something that's starting to happen. Um, so, so again, this is just something to get you all kind of started, get you thinking about. This isn't meant to provide you a turnkey, ready to implement solution, but it is hopefully something to when you're looking at how you're going to do your training, how you're going to do your onboarding, how you're going to do your supervision, your check-ins, to give you some things to think about. So if there's anybody in the group who would like to share something that has worked with them and their folks, it'd be great to hear.
You're welcome to put in the chat if that's easier and more accessible for you. And while you're thinking about strategies, I'm going to jump over to sharing some resources because I know we are getting close to time. The time went so quickly. So let me go here just to share some resources that we wanted to highlight. And Lisa will share the slide deck with everyone. So you'll have links to all of these. So in terms of articles and research, as Jose mentioned, and we've shared, there isn't too much, but there's a few here that we thought could be helpful for you to check out from Boston Consulting, Harvard Business Review. And of course, I had to give Jose some flowers for his journal article that he published recently on first gen professionals, adding to the academic research. And there are also a few online groups or communities that folks can connect with or join. We'll give a plug to our organization, First Gen Connect. There's also another big one on LinkedIn called First Gen Professionals Network. And we're also noticing a lot of emerging kind of group of professionals, whether they're coaches, mental health professionals, that have a focus on supporting first gen professionals, which is interesting to kind of see that this is becoming a much more salient identity for folks. So that's something to also keep an eye out. Let me check the chat. Yes, the hour did fly by. So let me go back. Oops. Well, thank you. But I do want to say, are there any strategies or questions for us? We do have a few minutes before passing it back to Lisa to officially close us out.
And what I can do now is I will I'm gonna officially thank you both, Casey and Jose, for being
Yay!
here, sharing your time and expertise and the research and strategies. And I'm going to end it here. And so then if people do have questions or things they want to share, we can go ahead and do that beyond the recording.